Hey guys, so next year the Tales series and myself will officially turn 30 years old, and while I ponder my own mortality, there is a high chance we'll finally see the next entry in Bandai Namco's iconic JRPG series. With Bandai Namco seemingly now only releasing Tales games around anniversaries, a new game coming out, or at least being announced next year, should be a certainty unless our fears are true and Bandai Namco has officially given up on the series in order to produce rubbish anime games until they are bought out and dissolved by Microsoft. Praying that the worst case does not happen, and we do indeed see the next entry in the Tales series, now would be a good time to lay out what I'd like to see in the new Tales game. I did a similar video about what I wanted to see in Xenoblade Chronicles 3 only a few months before Nintendo would announce that game, so hopefully me doing this video will guarantee a similar announcement from Bandai Namco. So let's dive into what I'd like to see in the next Tales game. Just a reminder before we begin that this video is brought to you by my lovely patrons like Cameron Strauss and Cool Cookie. For as little as $3 a month, you can get your name shouted out at the start of every Xenosanctum video, as well as access to bonus behind the scenes content, link in the description below. Now when it comes to Tales, the battle system is such a big deal to me that I'm going to split this video into two, with the first half focused on what I want to see outside of combat, and the second half diving into all the nitty gritty about what I want to see in the combat. So let's talk about everything I want to see outside of combat in this new Tales game. Now, a lot of what I'm going to say is in response to Tales of Arise. With it being the previous game in the series and standing in isolation by a good decent 5 years from Tales of Berseria, I feel like it's justified to focus my series improvements on this game's flaws specifically, and that's why my first point would make sure that this next Tales game gives ample focus to the side characters and villains. Arise infamously put way too much focus on Alphen and Shion to the point where pretty much the rest of the cast were redundant, with them playing no role in the plot outside of being there just to exposit responses to the events which Alphen and Shion were experiencing. One of the main reasons for this was the lack of villains for the cast to play off. While Alphen had Valoran to conflict with, the rest of the class unfortunately lacked villains to challenge them in the latter part of the game. The reason for this is most respects due to the game continuously killing off villains who could have served as great rivals for our heroes. Ganonbelt could have been a great rival for Law, and Amadre the same for Rinwall. Unfortunately, the game kills them off way too soon, resulting in Law and Rinwall not really having anyone to challenge them specifically for the rest of the game. Compare this to Tales of the Abyss, where the God Generals are a present threat throughout the game, and only finally get eliminated in the final dungeon. Heck, you don't even need to give the characters a rival to keep them relevant. As Arise shows with Dolohim, you can make a character relevant by giving them their own mission. As mentioned, Dolohim actually remains relevant in the late game with his quest to ascend to the leadership of Renan society in order to stabilise the chaos they had fallen into. Side plots like these need to have a much heavier focus in any new Tales game. On the topic of story, I think we need to calm down a bit from the high-end sci-fi stuff and super dark themes. Tales has always benefited from its bright and colourful fantasy setting. While it has its flaws, Tales of Zestiria was on the ball if you ask me when it came to its presentation and story. Nostalgia for classic JRPGs is pretty high at the moment, as seen with all the Square Enix remakes, thus I feel like a bright and colourful Tales game with a cute cast of characters would be very popular in an age where games like Genshin Impact are extremely popular. On the topic of the art style, Bandai Namco really needs to embrace 2D again. Tales was born out of being classic shonen anime in video game form, and anime, for the most part, is a 2D medium. Bring back the 2D character portraits, and especially the 2D skits. I don't care what anyone says, the skits in Tales of Berseria were great with the sheer amount of character poses and still frames. There's simply a level of expression that 2D characters can deliver that 3D models simply cannot match. While I love the look of 3D Tales games, they still need to leave space for the 2D artwork to shine. When you have legendary artists like Kosuke Fujishima working on the game, I want to see everything they have drawn. Going to the topic of locations, if Bandai Namco is going to throw millions of dollars into creating insanely detailed locales, the best they can do is make full use of these locales. Hence why the next Tales game really needs to bring back more backtracking so we can visit towns and locales again as part of the story. Let us see how these towns evolve throughout the adventure, and also let us complete side quests that we might have missed out on without having to go super out of the way from the main quest. They also need to design dungeons which don't end up as simple long corridors. Look into creating more dungeons that are based around a single main room, and try adding in more puzzles for the player to sort out. While you don't, and in my opinion should not go full Zelda designed dungeons like in Tales of Symphonia, a bit more interaction outside of pressing buttons could add some enjoyment to dungeons. As long as it's not block pushing, because pushing blocks suck. I'm also not totally against bringing back the Sorcerer's Ring. However, can we not have that stupid mechanic where when you use it against enemies it only ends up enraging them instead of stunning them? Because I don't like that. However, arguably where I want the biggest changes is in the battle system, so let's talk about that. I've made no effort to hide the fact that I absolutely hated the combat system in Tales of Arise. In fact, the last two Tales games have somewhat dropped the ball with the combat system, and this fundamentally needs to be the focus of a new Tales game. Mainly, there needs to be more options when it comes to combat. It arises pretty much every fight boiled down to equipping the right art and then spamming setups in the same order again and again and again until the boost strike is unlocked. Thus, the new game really needs to make combat more engaging. Now, while I can't wish for the return of the linear motion battle system, it's pretty certain that the limbs is dead and buried. Despite the limbs being dead, I still think we need to see the return of being able to dodge and block at different times. The dodge needs to be made much weaker, so it's not the all-in-one handy tool to avoid every attack. Players need to respond accordingly to the attack being made. Is it a fast attack? Block. Is it a powerful attack? Dodge. Is it a spell? Use Magic Guard. Along with making defensive play more difficult, offensive play should also be made more difficult as well. Don't just let every attack combo into one another. Have your powerful attacks blow light enemies away, meaning you'll need to use an attack which closes the distance rather than a stationary flurry attack. Give strong attacks longer reset animations, such that high damage attacks come at the cost of leaving you vulnerable. Heck, by introducing long reset animations, we can do away with CC and bring back the classic combo system into the series, in which you must combo weaker attacks into stronger attacks until you use your strongest art. In general, the player needs to think which attack is best for the situation at hand. Now you're probably thinking this sounds like a terrible idea, but here's where it gets better. In return for making defensive and offensive play harder, I want the enemies to be easier. Arise giving every enemy super armor and a ton of health regardless of how small they was a really dumb idea. Thus, for this new Tales game, smaller enemies should be easy to stun, but also easy to push away, allowing them to regain their stance. Meanwhile, bigger enemies should be slow, but will require you yourself to use your own slow arts in order to stagger them. The result of these changes I proposed should allow for a combat system where you can choose how you want to play. Do you want to be safe and chip away at the enemy's health with quick flurry attacks that you can dodge out of, or do you want to risk the slower attacks for maximum damage? For the publisher of the Dark Souls games, it surprises me how little Bandai Namco has learnt from FromSoft when it comes to making combat engaging. Alongside these changes to the combat, the next Tales game needs to bring back two series staples that should never have been removed: percentage-based healing items and multiplayer. And I would also love it if this new Tales game could be more interactive with multiplayer outside of combat, allow for the party to split up in towns and dungeons in order to do tasks faster. Allow player 1 to do shopping while player 2 picks up side quests. Allow player 1 to do the dungeon puzzles while player 2 grinds for experience. Or heck, even create dungeons like that one dungeon in Symphonia where the party had to split up. Sure, this probably wouldn't work with split screen, but I think an online multiplayer Tales game would be so much fun based on my previous experience playing Tales with friends. Finally, two small additions I wouldn't mind are some more variety in weapon and armour. Not so much as to equip the water armour for the water bus, but more how Yuri in Tales of Vesperia could equip a sword for speedy attacks or axes for powerful attacks. Create weapons and armour that allow for the character to move into different playstyles depending on how you like to play your character. Also, staying on the topic of player setup, I would really like it on the art selection screen if we could get a short video of each art in use. The art descriptions can only go so far to explain how an art works. If I could see a short video of how the art is in use, like we see in a lot of modern fighting games, it would make it a lot easier deciding which arts I want to equip to my character or not. And perhaps even include a training mode to allow us to practice our combos free from being attacked. And that's just some of the ideas I have for a new Tales game. Obviously, the next Tales game is likely well into development for this video to make a lick of difference, but I hope I was able to give you a feeling of what I want to see. Now it'll be interesting to see if Bandai Namco announces the next Tales game in a couple of months like Nintendo did with Xenoblade 3 after my previous predictions video. If so, I'll be sure to see how this game compares to the predictions I made here. In the meantime, tell me what you desire to see in the next Tales game. Until then, I'll see you later.